Welcome, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Can we please rise for O Canada?
As we gather, we are reminded that the municipality of South Huron is situated on Treaty 29 land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a community, we have responsibility to honor and respect this territory's significance for the Indigenous peoples who lived and continue to live upon it, and whose practices and spiritualities were tied to the land and continue to develop in relation to the territory and its other inhabitants today. In the spirit of reconciliation and truth, we acknowledge the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee peoples on whose traditional territory we are meeting.
Thank you. I recommend motion that the South Huron Council approves the agenda as presented. Mover, please. Councillor Neeb, seconded by Councillor McLeod-Haggett. Any questions? All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Disclose your beginning interest in the general nature thereof. Seeing none. Presentation.
We have Tina in today from Watsons and Associates. She's going to provide the development charges study update.
Is that on? Okay, perfect. So it's good to be in front of you again, and this time even better because it's in person versus virtually. And we'll just go over and provide a brief update as to the development charge background study and where we are now. Next slide, please. So again, just by way of background, the purpose of this presentation, we're here last on virtually on May 25th, and we went through some implementation options as well as some of the impacts, discussed as well the funding program that was through the province. There were some questions that came out of that discussion that we're here today to answer, as well as some additional information on implementation options, and then provide an update on the funding program that was announced by the province. Next slide. Next slide again, please. Thank you. So here again is just the listing of the questions and requested information that came out of the last time we were here on the 25th. So starting, just going to recap, it was a request for the actual growth that's happened since 2024 and 25. Some information on projects, including the London Road trunk sewer project, background information on costs for the mechanical wastewater treatment plant and the elevated tank in North Exeter. And then some description on DC eligible projects that are included in the elevated tank project. And then there was also a request to see the impacts on the rates should those projects come out. So we'll talk a bit about that and then go into some comparative analysis as well as discuss how we've incorporated Central Huron into the comparison. Next slide. So on the slide on the left, there is a table presenting the actual growth, which are the net new dwelling units that have been created in the town, in the municipality, pardon me, since 2020. And we chose that time period as it aligns to your last development charges study and the placement of that bylaw. And what you see on the left is that there is some fluctuation with 2020 through 23 being fairly strong. But when you got to 24 and 25, that slowed down quite a bit, which is in line with the trends that you're seeing, across the province, across the country with the changes in the economy there. If we look at the total from 2020 to 2025, that's about 366 units, so averaging 61 units a year. And then for 24 through 25 in total, it's 64 units. And then just from some context, on the right-hand side is a chart from the 2020 DC background study showing what that study has projected over the period from 2020 to 2030. And what that shows is it was averaging about 50 units a year, in total 500 units, and would say for the first little while, it was actually on track. And then if you look at the average, it's been about 61 units a year relative to what the background study is. So even over the period, it's been slightly higher than what the DC study had said for the 10-year period. Next slide. So on this slide, we looked at the London Road Trunk Sewer Project, and the question was to find out or discuss how it's been incorporated into the background study. So that project is not included in the DC background study. There was funding received by the municipality through the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund. And that funding was sufficient to cover significant costs that they would not have been a DC recoverable share. Therefore, it's not included in the DC background study. Next slide, please. So before going into a discussion on how the costs have been, which costs can come out or how you go about that process, I thought it's necessary to go back to the legislation and what it says regarding calculating DCs. So with development charges, the legislation is very prescriptive as to the methodology that must be followed in order to calculate those charges, and it leaves very little wiggle room on how you approach it. So if we start at the top, the Act requires that you start by identifying the amount, the type, and the location of residential and non-residential growth in a municipality. So everything that's premised in the development charges study starts with what that growth is, because that's the starting point based on the legislation. Once that's determined, then the next step is to determine if there's an increase in the need for service. So what do you need in order to supply services to that growth that you've identified? Again, the legislation will tell you services, which ones cannot be. We won't go into that technical detail. But again, if we're following the legislation, identify the growth, next thing, identify what you need. Typically, municipalities will do things like master plan studies to say, what do we actually need to provide the service at the right level of service? What's required? Get the experts in who then look into those questions, presenting through council. If we look at water, wastewater in particular, in 2025, the municipality completed its water, wastewater master plan. And part of that exercise was to understand what is required to provide the services in the community, including growth. The next step after that is to identify the costs that are for providing those services. So the capital costs in order to provide the services at the right level. So you've identified the growth, identified the increase in the need. How much does it cost is the next step. Then the legislation comes in and says, well, you've identified the cost. We're not just going to let you take that full cost and put it in a DC background study. You have to witness certain deductions that are mandatory. So if you get a grant, you need to deduct the grant. The municipality just went through that exercise where you receive some grants after the study was released that had to be witnessed through an addendum report back in March. Another is, a big one, is this benefit to existing development. If there's new infrastructure and those costs, you have to determine to what extent those projects benefit existing development. Once that's determined, it has to be deducted from the capital cost so that it comes from another source, whether it's rates, taxes, et cetera, but it couldn't be part of the development charges. Make those deductions and you get to what's called the DC recoverable cost. So the net cost that can actually go into a DC study. We take those costs and we say, okay, you can't recover. So the legislation's clear. You cannot recover costs for non-residential development from residential development. So you have to go back into those costs, split them, residential share, non-residential share. And then you take the respective shares and divide by the growth that you expect. So that residential cost, you divide by the total residential growth. The non-residential share, you do the same thing. So what I'm trying to make sure is clear is that that growth you started with at the top is coming in to your calculation, and it becomes a key component, because if you change that, anything in the cost that affects your DC recoverable amount, if you change that and the growth is still in there, that means your charge is understated. You've now not followed the spirit of the legislation, starting with growth. What are the costs into calculating that development charge? If we go to the next slide, please. So now I'll go into the next set of questions that are tied to the mechanical wastewater treatment plant, as well as the elevated tank. So if we just start with the costs, these costs are based on the recently completed water wastewater master plan and adjusted for inflation. And again, the total breakdown is provided from the master plans, 20 million split between design, construction, and some EAs and studies that are required. When we index it to $2025, because those were in $24, it ends up being 20.6 million. Similarly, if we look at the tank on the next slide. So if we look at the breakdown of the costs here, you've got the studies feasibility, EA, and then design, construction, and there's a provision there for land acquisition that was included in the master plan. So again, we've indexed those costs to account for inflation, and those are the costs we've brought into the DC background study, which is 9 million. And what you will see is that because of the legislation, again, the 9 million won't show in one table. It's going to be over 2 tables because the land has to be shown in a separate place, but the total when you add them would be the 9 million. Next slide, please. So we've done the scenario analysis that was requested on the 25th of May. However, before I show it, I think it's important to talk a bit about the caveats and that context for what those numbers actually mean. So again, if we start with the methodology, starting with growth into the needs and the cost, deductions to the DC recoverable cost divided by the growth. So now if we're looking at it to remove those projects, which we have done in terms of a calculation, however, we have to consider, as personally not an engineer, what I've done is remove the costs. So if we look at the methodology, the growth is in there in the denominator, but can you actually provide services to that growth without revising the capital program? So that's a key consideration, that to do that change where the projects get moved out of the DC, we need to identify what is the growth that is actually going to be serviced, because now those two things are not aligned. So back to, so we've talked about the master plan that provided and identified the growth and the infrastructure required, and the 2025 background study that pulled those costs and the growth, making sure they aligned, and that's what the calculations are based on. On the next slide, again, just emphasizing that if we remove just the costs and we keep the growth in, those two things are no longer aligned because you've got more growth than you have capital to actually provide the growth. The implication there being, if it's water, for example, can you still provide water with the right pressure to that development when it happens? And if you cannot provide the water at the right level, does the growth still happen? Can it still occur, the growth that we have in this DC background study? And so the numbers that are calculated that we'll see in the next couple of slides, they're illustrative only, in part and primarily because you now have them divorced from the growth. They're separated from the growth that can be serviced. How do you go forward if if there's a desire to look at it and say, we want to not proceed with those projects, then it's going back to finding the engineers who can then tell us what is the growth that can be accommodated without those projects in the DC background study, which means the master plan you've done, you're basically restarting the process to relook at that. So if we go to the next slide, please. So these are those numbers that I will emphasize again, it's illustrative only, taken out the project. So if we look at the columns on the right, scenario 1 removes the elevated tank only. Scenario 2 removes only the mechanical wastewater treatment plant. Scenario 3 removes both projects. In the very last row in the table, what you see is the reductions in the DC range from $983 to a little under $3,000. So if we put it again in context of a house and a mortgage, most mortgages are what, 25 to 30 years. So if we go 25 years, that's a change of somewhere between $16, $15 to $20-something a month. It's money, but again, if we put in the full picture, it's not, it becomes a bit clearer what the impact is of that change. If we go next slide, please. So similarly, we did the same analysis with the same caveat that this is taking just the projects out, but the growth is still in there and it would need to be addressed before the study goes forward. It would be a 40 cents reduction to a range from 40 cents to $1.21. I'll also note though that once the growth is actually adjusted, what may end up being the case is it may be determined that, okay, we don't want to go with these projects, but now you need a whole range of new projects. So there's no guarantee what the change in cost will be because you're revisiting how the servicing will be provided. So you will have a different set of cost estimates, and then we can tell you what the impact will be. But right now, we don't have a way to tell without adjusting the growth and understanding the servicing. And then the other thing is, so let's say that happened and the projects came out regardless. Developers are going to be looking at this study and saying, we know in 2025, you said you needed a mechanical treatment plant. 40, whatever the year will be. We know you needed it when you still had a population of X. And they're going to come back to try to get another further deduction because they keep track of these studies. And every time you do a study, they whip out the last one and they say, oh, but last time you said we need a greater deduction here. So once, that's just something to be mindful that once the costs are what they are, they will be split and they will, if the servicing requires a mechanical treatment plant, the MOE won't approve expansions to Lagoon, the project will happen. It just becomes a question of what share is coming from DCs, what share is coming from existing users through like rates. And then it begs the question as well to say, well, if I'm an existing user today, this project gets taken out. It's brought in, say 10 years from now. You've had some growth happen, but there were some existing users who didn't have to pay as much. But now when you do your BTE, what are those currently existing users going to pay? Are they going to pay the same amount they would have paid today? My guess is probably no, it may be a bit more. So now they're also paying part of it. So it's just cutting the pie different ways, but it's determined what the pie is once the servicing is determined. Next slide, please. So this slide provides the comparison with the expiry dates, so effective dates of the different bylaws, as well as the expiry dates of the different bylaws. We've also noted that Central Huron is not, even though it's in the table, they don't currently have development charges. And so there is no rate for them. Another comment I wanted to add is that the City of London is actually undertaking, even though their bylaw expires in 2031, they have started the process to update their development charges. The intent being just to make sure they're trending and approaching the cost the right way. And then the next slide presents the same information just for commercial and retail. And then the final slide is showing industrial, showing the municipality's current position versus the proposed for industrial development. Okay, so if we skip ahead 2 slides to the one that says implementation options, please. Perfect, thank you. So last time we'd come forward and presented 2 options for implementation. This time we've come back with 3 options. So the first one on the left is no phase-in. So this is the option where January 1, 2027, the full calculated rates would come into effect. And so we've put it on the side because there's some nuance with it. There would be no exemption provided, no revenue foregone. The right-hand side presents 2 options with phase-in. So the first one is a phase-in over 2 years. So 50% of the increase in year 1, remainder year 2, third one does it over a 3-year period. And with the 2 options for the phase-in, there will be revenue foregone that the legislation requires to be funded from non-DC sources. So typically that would be property taxes to fund that. If we go to the next slide, please. So on this slide, just illustrating what the exact numbers would look like. So if we look at option 1, the current rate for a single detached dwelling is about $6,500, a little under. So the calculated charge is $19,131, currently in 2026 dollars. So that is the charge that would come in effect in 2027 and all the way through for the term of the bylaw or until it's repealed. So you'll see on the far right that the revenue foregone says not applicable because there would be no revenue foregone. Under option 2, which is the 50% phase-in implementation over 2 years, the current rate is $64.67. So in 2027, that rate would be would go up to paying 50% of the increase. So it would go to about $12,800. And then in 2028, it would go to the $19,131 and then continue till the bylaw expires or is repealed. Revenue foregone under that option is about $545,000. Option 3, which is the new one, the 3-year phase-in, would take the current charge from $6,500 today to $10,688, so $10,700 in 2027. In 2028, it would go up to $14,900, and then 2029, $19,000. So it'll be a more gradual way of implementing the rate. That results in slightly more revenue foregone of a little, about 1.1 million. Again, if your growth accelerates and for whatever reason everybody wants to build in South Huron, those numbers could change. If growth is slower, those numbers would also be changing and lower. Next slide, please. Yeah. And then just here by way of update on the funding program that was announced by the province, so the DC reduction program, which was the 8.8 billion over 10 years, requiring a reduction of 30% to 50% from the rates that you had in effect on March 30th. So that would mean going the 6,500 and reducing that by 30% to 50%. It would not consider your current rates, the 19,000 that's calculated. The program also requires that the municipality funds 10%, and it would provide funding for the DC recoverable share of projects. So if you have like benefit to existing, et cetera, the program would not cover that. It would only cover the DC recoverable share and require the municipality to also contribute 10% of those DC recoverable costs. Next slide, please. Okay. It also provides a number of restrictions there. For example, it says the project should start by July 31, 2030 and be complete by October 31, 2035. And then requires that municipalities submit their DC background study, among other things, as part of the application. Another thing I wanted to highlight with this program is that should there be cost overruns, the funding is very clear that those would be fully on a municipality. So even though these projects are so far out, right, talking 2030, for example, if the program's approved, then those cost overruns will be on the municipality, which can also mean that the costs coming from the municipality are even higher. So in terms of thinking about what would be on the table for the municipality, it would be you're reducing rates that we've just talked about, saying if we calculate based on the capital program that they need to be 19,000 based on the capital program. The province is saying discount the 6,500 by 30 to 50%. In exchange, we'll then give you 90% of DC eligible costs for some other projects. So the math sometimes becomes a little tricky because you may be giving up a whole lot more, and they'll look at the cost, what you're giving up in terms of that background study, but you also want to consider what you would give up in terms of this updated background study, which is not being considered as part of the provincial funding program. And then just in terms of next steps, so next slide, please. So what we're hoping for today is to get some input from council on the preferred implementation option of the three that we've discussed, and then hopefully appear before you again for an anticipated bylaw passage on July 13th, with the bylaw coming into effect regardless of phase-in option on January 1, 2027. Would also work with staff to witness any of the required notices, et cetera, to make sure that the bylaw follows the law, basically. And with that, that concludes my prepared presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. There's a lot of numbers there. But I think council kind of has a better understanding of where we're going now. So thanks. Questions, comments from council? Councilor Oak.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a question, and thanks, Tina, for your update tonight. The chart that you had with the municipal comparisons for single detached, they talk about bylaw effective date and then an expiry date. I guess, why are some municipalities like with 5 years and some are 10 years? I guess what, like ours doesn't expire according to this until 2030. So I'm just wondering why we're doing it right now if it doesn't expire until 2030. Just could you give a bit of background on why some say 5 years, some say 10 years on that?
So through the mayor, the reason you're seeing a difference between some still saying 5 years and some saying 10 years is up until a couple of years ago, the province mandated through the DCA, a bylaw was only good for 5 years. So municipalities, some would put a provision directly in their bylaw that says this bylaw will expire in 5 years. Some did not have that provision. Then the province, through the different changes that have come through, went back and said, you know what? The bylaw can be good for 10 years. So that meant if municipality had a bylaw that says it's good for 5 years, if they don't go back and remove it, then it's still good for 5 years. But they can go back through and repeal that provision. So some municipalities have done that, where they've gone in, repealed it, so they're now 10 years, some haven't. And the decision whether to do the process early or wait really comes down to what is being seen on the ground. If you know the costs are changing, your municipality is growing, you're completing master plan studies, then you want to put that change in effect now, not later. Because if you wait and you know that your rates should be, and I'll just use we heard here, they're supposed to be 20,000 today based on what's calculated. Then you wait till 2030. That means the growth that's happened between now and 2030 was actually getting a discount. So some places will say, well, we don't want to do that. If we have information telling us what it should be and what we need, we want to quickly go through, update our process so that we're treating people fairly. So that's some of the decision-making that happens that informs that.
Councilor.
Yeah, thank you. Just and thank you for that. The other question I had was you mentioned about the revenue foregone by phasing in. How was that calculated? like there, I assume there's a formula, or how do you come up with 500,000 or 1.1 million if it's phased in over 2 years or 3 years? How was that? And that I assume is assuming there's actually growth based on projections. If there's no growth, that number isn't there, sort of thing. The difference. But I just wondered how that formula is calculated.
So through the mayor, the formula is based on the projected growth. So if you recall on one of the slides, we had the growth and you had the chart that shows you the different growth by year. So we look at that growth and say, okay, if they come in and they were supposed to pay 19, they paid 6, what's the delta, for example, there? And that difference is revenue that's foregone that needs to be funded from a different source. So then we look at the units under the two scenarios. And of course, in option 2, it's happening over 2 years. Option 3, it's happening over 3 years. And that's what we look at and then take aggregate that and give you the sum.
So just on that note, then the growth, we're slowing down slower than what the growth chart said that we were going to be growing. The last 2 years we had 64 in total, where it said we were going to have, I'm not sure, 57 or something each year. And so we're behind that already. But you're still using that growth chart in the formula today.
Sorry, through the mayor. So we're using the updated forecast from the new DC background study. And one thing I'll note is that the growth may fluctuate from year to year. So if you don't mind going to the slide with the table, please. Oh, sorry, keep going back. This slide, thank you. So if we look at this chart, it's a perfect example of how some years you were over. So if you looked at it just from 24-25, then it would show that the forecast was way off, right? Because that would be low. But then if you look at 2020 through 23, it was above what was projected. And overall, it's trending. So one of the things that we want to look at is that these updated forecasts prepared as part of the 2025 DC background study considered like the overall situation, the circumstance, the growth projections that are known, taking into account even information that comes from the province, like the Ministry of Finance keeps a pretty detailed growth projections and came up with a number. Year to year may fluctuate, and you spot on that if you get zero growth over the next 2 or 3 years, then you would have no revenue foregone. But like, on the flip side, if you get a lot of growth, because all the efforts to stimulate the economy actually work, then that number would be much higher.
Any further questions from council? Councilor Vaughn.
Okay, so thank you for the report. And thank you for that explanation as to what is assuming that 500,000 or $1 million in the options 2 and 3. But it all assumes the growth as per our Huron County growth study. You mentioned a amended growth figure. I'm not sure. Which growth study are you referring to?
So through the mayor, the growth study that I'm referring to is the one that's contained in the 2025 background study, DC background study.
Okay, so I'm assuming that's the Huron County one. I don't know.
So through
No, it's not. Don's shaking his head no.
So through the mayor, that would have considered a number of sources, including Huron County, including the master plan that's completed and the servicing assumptions built into that. So the best place I would recommend is that it outlines in the background study the different sources, the activity that's witnessed in the municipality to try to get to those numbers. So it's taken from multiple sources to develop a more robust forecast.
Okay. And if we were seeing that over the next couple of years, the growth was not at all in keeping with those two studies, but was more in keeping with the experience we're seeing in 24 and 25, would we have the option as a council to reduce the development charges from the 19,000 that's being proposed?
So through the mayor, if that becomes what you see, that you're saying the growth is lower, I would say because it's a rate, whether the units happen in year 1 or in year 10, right? If you still think the total growth is what's projected, whether all the units come earlier, like we see in the period from 2020 through 2023, or they end up being later, that will be something to actually look at and say, when is this growth happening? Because you can have acceleration, right? Where it's just the point in time you're at. Right now, we've got 2 years that were lower, but somebody else could then look at the years that were higher and say, well, overall growth has been higher. So I think it would require going back and seeing if that changes the overall trajectory of the municipality, because these studies are very long-term studies that you're doing. And then if the sense is still that these rates are something you want to revisit, it would still require following that methodology in the legislation. What is the growth we think we'll have? What are the needs for that growth? What are the capital costs? What is the new calculated charge?
Okay, until somebody else raises their hand. There's a dilemma here. A dilemma here in my mind in terms of a lot of the growth that we talk about, either at Huron County or in our background study, I'm assuming has a lot to do with the approvals we've already given to a number of developers that already have come to South Huron and have invested in some way to improve property so that it can be developed. So there's different numbers on those houses that are awaiting being built, depending on what you're looking at any given time. But I would say roughly there's probably about 600 houses that have been given approval through a subdivision to go ahead and be developed. And so the dilemma in my mind is many of these contractors that came to us on the with a partial understanding of cost, and that being around $6,500 in development charges. So we have seen some growth in these charts. And now what we're proposing is potentially a charge per dwelling of 3 times that amount. So on the one hand, the Ontario government has given a rebate, HST rebate, feds in the province. And on the other hand, we're looking at taking it back through development charges. Now, I know that's what it feels like when I'm reading all of this and seeing the numbers going up and down. So I'm also listening to what you had to say in terms of with our wastewater study, and that council approved it. And there's 2 big projects that are out there around the 10-15 year mark that may or may not be needed at that particular time. You have factored that in a new grid for us to bring the development charges potentially, if we didn't do those 2 projects, down to a $16,000, so a $3,000 less kind of fee. All of those projects are going to depend quite a bit on us meeting these growth targets. And I'm concerned that with the increase in cost per single dwelling, that we are going to have our development, which has been moving along well and then slowly over the last few years, see a real decrease. So it's the balance I'm worried about in terms of, if we increase charges and the overall cost, are we going to, in a way, shoot ourselves in the foot and have developers who are going to choose not to continue to develop the lands we've given them the approval to do. So don't really have a question there, except for the fact that I'm asking your opinion in terms of how you come to a conclusion on the balance of those two components in terms of we're making it more unaffordable by our development charges, or we look at a lower development charge by slowing down some of these huge capital investments.
So through the mayor, I understand how that is a delicate balancing act. I would say, though, that there's a couple things that have been proposed already in front of council for consideration that help with that achieve that balance. So the first one is that implementation, delayed implementation, as well as consideration of phase-in. What that's doing is that if somebody was waiting to pull building permits this year, maybe they've done their pro forma with the 6,500, they're essentially getting a heads up that these rates are going to be going up. You know, you got to get a move on this and take the permits while the DCs haven't gone up. So that's one way to help cushion those costs. The second approach that's also in front through the implementation option is the phasing in of the increase. If it's done over 2 years, over 3 years, again, there's a cost to the municipality. That is a potential cost depending on the revenue foregone. But I think that is all trying to balance that increase with giving the development industry like a heads up of what's coming. Another thing that I would say is a dilemma or something to be mindful of. When you do a survey across the province, what you'll see is development tends to go, like if you map out DCs versus no DCs, a lot of the high growth municipalities in the province also have high DCs. And so that makes it challenging to think DCs will be the only factor that affects the location of a development. If they've committed to it, I think even when I think of the comments received through the public process, a lot of them have been saying, talking about phasing it in, give us some time to adjust, because they do adjust. But I think to not provide the service is a bigger risk, because if you start holding permits when they want, because there's no wastewater servicing, that would affect them much further down the road. So I think the phase in is a great option to consider to try to give them time to react to the change and still make sure you can provide the services when that development happens within the municipality.
Councillor Oak.
Thank you, Deputy. So we've just done an official plan and we've got a settlement area, and I guess the question I have is, if we were to remove the elevated water tower, the north one, and the mechanical wastewater treatment plant, I guess question is, are any of the proposed areas that we have in our settlement area now, do we need those two to fulfill the settlement area? I know if we expand to the east of Exeter, past the settlement area out Huron Street, we would potentially need, that's when the elevated water tower has to come into play for pressure. But I just wondered if things get built out to the south and we fill in the other subdivisions, if those all take place, is there any requirement that our current water tower and our current lagoon system can handle build out in all of those areas today for the next 10 years?
Through the chair, it is my understanding that we have enough for what is right now in the official plan. Dawn, do you have anything further to say to that, or are you concurrent with that as well?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Dietrich, to help Tina out here a bit, there's a little bit more expanded answer. So to be really clear, what's approved now in the official plan, there is sufficient capacity in the Exeter sewage lagoon to accommodate the growth that's in the existing official plan. Now, that mechanical plant is a lot more complicated than just picking a magic number that you grow to a certain point and it automatically triggers the plant, because it has two significant components. It has growth and it has technology. And the technology side is linked to the regulatory requirements to treat sewage to a certain criteria. So we have a regulatory requirement to treat sewage to a certain quality. It's in our ECA. We're breaking the law if we exceed that. So as we continue to grow, there's two things that are going to come together that will trigger an expansion. And just to be really, really clear, the Ministry of the Environment has informed the municipality and the town of Exeter, since they approved the last expansion in 1999, no further expansion of the sewage lagoon, not a physical expansion. You have to change the technology. And that means changing technology to something that can meet modern effluent quality criteria. So you cannot continue with larger volumes to be treated there beyond what's already approved. You cannot, they will not approve a physical expansion of those sewage lagoons. We will be required to change the technology. So it's not a simple answer just to say that there's adequate sewage treatment in the existing sewage lagoon for what's approved in the official plan. But when you're looking at theoretically everything that's approved in the official plan, there is an equal amount of treatment capacity in the existing sewage lagoon. That is true and correct. Are you going to be able to access it all? Are we going to break the law by not being able to treat sewage all through the winter and meet the effluent criteria, quality criteria? Probably not. So theoretically it's there. In practical terms, it may not be there. So we can grow, we can do a lot of growth, but can you get it all is a big question mark. The water tower is very, very clear and concise. It's geography and location. So it is the east end of Exeter. So what's within the official plan, basically you can draw a line on the east side of Eastern Ave, and that's as far as you can develop. All down the east side, everything east of that cannot be developed. So there's only a small area that's been approved in the official plan that's outside of that. Some of it's existing, small little stretch that's future. But the existing water infrastructure can support everything that's within the approved official plan, except anything that's further to the east. Now, what really complicates this, because I've been asked the question, is the London Road South trunk sewer. So that provincial grant that we received to expand in that area also changes both equations, because there's roughly about a third of that land that happens to fall that cannot develop without the water tower. So if somebody comes along and wants to develop in that area, they would have to be told no. There's effectively a development freeze from basically Eastern Ave out to Morrison Line. So hopefully that helps with the discussion.
Thank you. Any more comments, questions? Councillor Dietrich.
Thanks to the chair. That's quite a bit to swallow there, Don. What option do you think we should take?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Dietrich, there's another piece that's in the mix and we've seen it already, and we've been waiting for this, is the grant programs from the province, and it's combined with the province and the feds. We weren't ready for it. So this grant program that we have in our hands right now, we have nothing to apply for because we have to use the DC charges background study from the last one from 2020, and there's practically nothing in there. So the mechanical sewage treatment plant is in the previous DC charges background study, but it only has a 10% growth component, just under 2 million. So it's in that study. This is not new. The only thing that's new in the 2025 is it's 50% of the mechanical plant is growth. So that is not new. That is still in the existing DC background study, but a much smaller amount of money. So to miss out on grant opportunities because we haven't approved a background study, to me is crazy. If it was my call, I would do the background study. The builders and developers are telling us they're not concerned about the amount of the DC charges background study. They're telling me not now. That's what they've been consistently telling staff is they cannot afford it now, but they don't disagree with the study. They've been through and asked lots of questions about every part of it. They're more concerned about their long-term investment, which they have millions and millions of dollars invested in the ground and in their business. And they want the opportunity long-term to be able to make money, to get a return on their investment. So by not doing this and not embracing it, you're cutting off the long-term investment. Short-term, there needs to be relief. But the counterbalance here is to have something in place so we're ready if there's some type of grant funding program that came along. Like what you're going to hear tonight about Lambton Shores are going to apply for a project. They have things in their DC charges background study. Their DC charges are a lot more than ours. They're double ours. But they have this ability to apply, and they are going to apply. And quite aggressively trying to go after that. So we have a big missed opportunity by not being ready for this. But the balance is to be ready, identify the growth-related costs, but provide relief in the short term for the builders, developers, because they need it right now. We're in a slow period of time with development, but we're also hearing from the builders that the HST rebates are now reinvigorating the building, and they're now starting to see movement. So if you're asking my opinion, Councillor Dietrich, I would definitely, without hesitation, pass the background study so that we have adequate long-term planning. All our developers that are working in the area have their long-term investments protected. They have some confidence that the infrastructure will be there when they develop out long-term, but provide some short-term relief and be ready. If there's a grant program like this one that just came along that we have to apply by Friday, we missed the boat completely. Can't do it. I would have loved to have been in a position that we could have submitted something, but we have nothing.
Councillor Oak.
So thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Don, for those comments. So what I'm hearing is to move ahead with the development charge study, but maybe a phasing in because they need the not now. I've talked to a developer, and in the last year they maybe sold 2 houses in a development, and when the government announced the HST rebate, they sold 6 within the first 2 days. And so they're worried about these development charges putting a kibosh to any momentum that they were getting, sort of thing. So I'm sort of in the camp of a phase in as well, just to keep the momentum going when the upper levels of government are also helping to keep that momentum going as well. So it's a partnership that we need to work with them for everybody to benefit, I think. So I agree. Thank you.
Any for? Go ahead.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Mike, can you tell me how many builders are ready to pull permits now? Or has there been a freeze?
Through the Deputy Mayor. There has not been a freeze. Like Councillor Luck was just saying, we've actually issued quite a few single-family dwelling permits this last quarter, or last month, sorry. So builders are still applying for the single detached, and we're issuing the permits. No different than before. Much quicker than in the first quarter. First quarter, as you guys know, we only seen 3 single-family dwellings. I think we're up to 10 or 12 this quarter, so substantially quicker due to the HST rebate.
Councillor Oak.
Thank you, Deputy. The one thing that we haven't talked about is, for the most part, we've been talking about the residential DC. The commercial and industrial increases that we're potentially looking at. You know, I'm a little concerned about the increases there as far as any businesses that want to expand or us trying to attract some businesses to come to South Huron with our DC charges increasing like they are. Would the phase in, if we were to go with a phase in, would that phase in also be linked to the commercial and the industrial properties as well?
Through the chair, absolutely, the phase-in could also be provided to non-residential development.
Any further questions or comments?
Yeah,
Councillor Oak,
just
sorry.
one last thing. In our resolution last time, we asked about what projects are DC eligible that that incorporated in the water tower project. And I didn't see that in the presentation. It was one of the resolution items that we were going to get a listing of the projects that the new North Water Tower project, what DC projects or what would be eligible for DC charges that are linked to that water tower.
Who would like to answer that?
I can start and then Dawn will take it on. So through the chair, what we had provided in the response was a breakdown of the cost to show the projects. And that's how we'd address the question of what's actually included in there. I can, in terms of the DC eligible percentage for the project, I can pull that up in a minute. But Dawn, if you want to jump in while I do that.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Dietrich, I think if I understand the question correctly, it's the percentage of the water tower that's growth related? Because there was a question from a developer about the benefit to existing. Which the way it ended up, the originally 100% of the water tower was included in the DC charges background study with a deduction of the value of the replacing of the existing water tower. So in rough numbers, it was the new water tower is 3.5 megaliters and the existing water tower is 1.5 megaliters. So the consultant took the value of the 100% of the value of the 350 and the benefit to existing was deducted as the a straight percentage of 1.5 of the 3.5. There was a couple of developers who questioned that should be a greater benefit to existing, and that was evaluated. I think it ended up at 60%. We engaged our engineering firm that did the master plan, reviewed the cost. We went out to a water tower specialist contractor to verify the cost estimates. And they circled back to that the deduction for the benefit to existing was in the range of that 40%. So the growth component is 60%. Is that what you're looking for, Councillor?
Thank you, Don. Councillor Need.
Thank you through the chair. With the phased in approach, let's say, hypothetically, we do 2-year, 3-year, and we do have growth. Let's say we have all these developers, they jump on board and they start putting permits in and applying. Is it possible that the amount of revenue that has to be covered through the taxpayer is going to be more than that 545,000 or that 1 million if it exceeds the expected growth?
So through the chair, yes, it is possible that the revenue foregone would be higher if the growth is faster.
Councillor Need.
In my head, that's an issue. We've consistently talked around this table over the last 4 years with the principle of development paying for development. In fact, multiple members of council have said that. And so I have an issue that when it comes down to development charges, we are now looking at burdening our taxpayers with the cost of growth. That's problematic. I think that contributes to NIMBYism. I think that leaves a foul taste in people's mouth, because why would they be in support of any new developments or any new buildings when they're going to be the ones on the hook to pay for the growth? We've also talked around this table about issues of having all of the right mechanisms or more mechanisms in place for us to collect revenue so that we can unburden the taxpayers. AMO released a backgrounder on development charges. And they mentioned in the backgrounder that the City of Ottawa experimented with offering lower DC concessions in a specific area. The concessions that they offered did not lower the price of housing compared to any other areas of the city. In the GTA, on the border of 2 municipalities with different development charges, the municipality with lower development charges, in fact, had higher housing prices. So I still have a very big issue with us thinking of stepping back and saying, no, we're not going to collect what is due. Or we're going to pull projects that we have approved and then figure it out later. Because that's going to increase the costs 5 to 10 years down the road for our taxpayers. So even with the phasing in, that is an issue. I don't know how much growth or no growth we will see, but I do know that our taxpayers are going to be paying for it.
Further comments? Questions? Seeing none? I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This truly is a tough one. And I agree with what Councillor Neeb has said, that development pays for development. I've gone back and forth between phase 1 or option 1 and option 2. Your presentation today answered a lot of my questions, because I was coming in looking at asking for some projects to be pulled, given what was in the 2024 water wastewater report that we did. But I don't want to sound as someone that goes back and forth teetering, saying I'm going to do one thing over another. But I think after your presentation and the questions that have been asked and answered, I think I have to go with option 1.
Okay, that's a little further down the road, down the line, but it's great to have that discussion right now, so we kind of have an idea, but Councillor Vaughn.
Thank you for the deputy. Okay, since we have graciously brought Dawn into the conversation, I do have a question for Dawn. Sorry, Dawn. Okay, so we know that the DC charges really start from growth and then projects are incorporated into the equation. There's a number of elements. So of those two projects, Dawn, and they're both sizable in number, the wastewater and the water tower. We've asked your opinion, what you would do so far. And I'm going to ask your opinion in terms of, is the timing, in notwithstanding all of the approvals that have gone on so far and so forth, is the timing of those projects realistic, or could they be moved out a couple of years?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Dietrich, yes, any change can be made. So yes, projects can be pushed out. The gamble here is if you get the growth, it's going to move the projects forward. If you don't get the growth, you push them out further. So my crystal ball isn't working really well, but that's it's a gamble on how things are going to unfold. The other part that's part of the equation is we are going to do everything possible to push out these large expenditures. So on the best information that we have at this time, then that is the time frame. But what's going to happen in 10 years? I'm not sure what's going to happen next month. But as you continue to move out, it gets much more difficult to predict. But the basis of your question of can they be moved out? If we don't get the growth, if the growth slows down and continues, then yes, projects will be moved out.
Councillor Oak.
Yeah, thank you. And I respect everybody's opinions around the table here. The one concern I have is the message that we're sending to the businesses and the developers that come to the municipality to, you know, they've bought land, they put pipes in the ground, and they're starting to get to the point where they're digging foundations, and all of a sudden we're going to jack rates up from $6,000 to $18,000 or $19,000. And they came in good faith to develop here, and all of a sudden it's like we're putting a sign up closed for business versus open for business, and trying to work with developers. So that's my biggest my dilemma when it comes to this, the message that we're sending to partners with the municipality as well. So in the growth of the municipality. So that's my takeaway from these discussions tonight as well. Yes, I don't want growth pays for growth, and that's but at the same token, there was an evidence of good faith that these were our numbers, and now we're changing them on people that are sinking money into these and so that cost is going to be added to the properties. And we talk about affordable houses, and every time we turn around, it's another 12,000 here or whatever to these properties. They're going to get passed along, and so it just keeps pushing the prices of development up, so cost up. So that's my only comment on that part. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking for anything further. Seeing nothing, we have a recommendation.
The South Huron Council receives the development charges study update presentation by Tina Chitsinde of Watson and Associates.
Could I get a mover? Moved by Counselor Neeb, seconded by Counselor Dietrich. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Sorry, move on. Thank you very much, Tina, for the presentation. It helped me a lot with my decision also, so I appreciate that. And Mr. Giverson, thank you. Delegations, none?
None.
Sorry.
Yep.
Public meeting?
No public meeting?
We have a recommendation for the special meetings of the special May 25th and the regular council meeting.
That South Huron Council adopts the minutes of the special meeting of May 25th, 2026, and the regular council meeting of June 1st, 2026, as printed and circulated.
Moved by Counselor Neeb, seconded by Counselor Oak. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Counselor and board and committees.
Okay. Recommendation that the minutes and correspondence of the following committees and or boards be received as presented to council. Exeter Rodeo, minutes of April 16th, 2026, and Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, correspondence, Conservation Authorities Consolidation, update 2026, June.
Mover, please. Counselor Neeb, seconded by Counselor Vaughn. Any questions on any of those? Counselor Oak, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy. The Upper Thames put in a bit of a timeline, budget timeline for this fall. I assume ABCA is probably going to be doing the same thing in light of this merger that's going on. How is that going to affect South Huron and the timelines at all, or for the budget process at all?
Through the chair. I think that was intentional by the province with the strong mayor powers. After inauguration day, then the new mayor would set the budget. So it's to fit it within that. So we should have both conservation authorities for the next budget.
Marissa.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, it's a very fluid environment with all of the conservation authorities, but we at the ABCA are going to be starting our budget in fall, just as usual. And with the intention of presenting to our member municipalities in the fall as usual, and hopefully having it passed by the end of the year, which is what our usual time frame is. And it looks like members from the member municipalities will probably continue on till around February. But again, that's fluid. So we'll just have to see how that shakes out. I'll keep that in mind for the next meeting because we're meeting with ABCA on Thursday this week. So maybe we'll find out more news. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? That's carried. Staff reports.
Recommendation that South Huron Council receives staff report BPS 12/2026 development charges background study update, and that council approves the blank option as outlined in Watson and Associates June 15th, 2026 presentation as the implementation rate approach for the development charges, and that the authorizing bylaw be brought back for its 3 readings.
Okay, I guess we need to pick an option. Counselor Dietrich.
I'd pick option 1.
Moved by Milt. Counselor Dietrich, sorry. Seconder, do we have a seconder? Seconded by Counselor Neeb.
Want me to read it again?
Yes, please.
I'll just read that again. Moved by Councillor Dietrich, seconded by Councillor Neeb, that South Huron Council receives staff report BPS 12/2026 Development Charges Background Study Update, and that Council approves the first option as outlined in Watson and Associates June 15th, 2026 presentation as the implementation rate approach for the development charges, and that the authorizing bylaw be brought back for its 3 readings.
Councillor Neeb.
Could we have that split? Is that possible?
Yes.
Moved by Councillor Dietrich, seconded by Councillor Neeb, that South Huron Council receives staff report BPS 12/2026 Development Charges Background Study Update.
So we just use.
Hmm?
We just use the same. We've already moved.
Yeah, for all the splits.
Okay, any comments? Seeing none? All in favor? That's carried.
Moved by Councillor Dietrich, seconded by Councillor Neeb, that South Huron Council approves the first option as outlined in Watson and Associates June 15th, 2026 presentation as the implementation rate approach for the development charges, and that the authorizing bylaw be brought back for its 3 readings.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. Any comments? Councillor Vaughn.
Yeah, I just want to be clear here. Option 1 is basically saying that, let's assume we approve the bylaw on the next council meeting, that for the remainder of this year, this calendar year, the development charges are 6,467. And then come January 1, they're 19,131, and the same each year thereafter.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Oak.
Just a question, in the report, a staff report, and I know we passed that part of it, but just to comment, or can maybe Rebecca comment on the lame duck period, just to comment on that aspect that we had asked, what the implications are for this at all, or, well, this one, I guess, for sure, DC study.
Through the chair, I probably should let the clerk comment on lame duck.
Through the chair, so we did reach out to the municipal solicitor on this, and they reviewed the restricted acts under the municipal act, and they advised that it would not trigger any of the restricted acts of council.
Any further comments? All in favor of option 1? That's carried. Community service.
Okay. That South Huron Council receives staff report CSD 08/2026 Community Services Sponsorship and Advertising Program, and that South Huron Council approves and endorses the sponsorship and advertisement program and proposed fees in principle, and that the necessary bylaw be brought back to council for the required 3 readings.
Can I get a mover, please? Moved by Wendy McLeod Haggett. Seconded by Councillor Dietrich. Okay, discussion. Councillor Oak.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy. I'm just wondering, maybe Amanda, you could give us an overview of the program basically, and how you came up with the fees and the ideas of it.
Through the deputy mayor. So just a quick overview of the program. So we're looking at different sponsorship and advertising options for revenue streams. So we conducted a bit of a municipal scan to see what other municipalities do in regards to sponsorship or advertising opportunities. Currently, or I should say previously, we relied on what we call our rink boards, wall ads, and in-ice logos, as well as advertisements on the resurfacers. So we were just looking to extend opportunities around. So it's really a starting point. We didn't want to start too big, but there's definitely maybe some areas to grow as we see how the program progresses. So some of the newer opportunities is the dressing room, naming those. There's also what we call stair risers. So when you go into the arena, the front of the stairs, you can have advertisements on there. We also looked at naming rights for some of our diamonds, some of our locations for our community halls, as well as potential dog park sponsorship advertisements, benches, trees, things like that. So in regards to the fees, so there was, let me just, a user fee review and revenue generation study conducted in 2024. So what they had indicated is that our prices were in line with what we were currently offering. So the wall boards, the rink ads were in line. So we kept those the same. Any new opportunities that we hadn't had before, once again, part of that municipal scan to remain in line with other areas. And then in regards to the bench and the tree program, that's more of a cost recovery type program. So for the bench, the price was figured out and how much is a bench, concrete pad, the plate for that, and maybe some staff time needed if hopefully, heaven forbid, there's any vandalism or anything like that. In regards to the tree, contacted the ABCA to see what their tree program was like and tried to keep it in line with theirs as well as the suggestions for the native type of trees to plant. So hopefully that answered all your questions.
Councillor,
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for looking into that, Amanda. I guess so. Just behind, there's a wallboard advertising in the arena, and then there's behind the bench. So what's the difference there? Because there's wallboards behind the bench as well. Can you just let me know the difference there?
Yeah, so that's really placement and size. So the wall boards, you're correct, is on the wall. It's a smaller size advertisement. And then there's space behind the benches, really, that would be a bit bigger, a little more prominent. I mean, if you're looking at your child playing hockey, they're probably on the bench. So once again, it's a new area. Don't know how it will go, but we'll see if that's an area that people do want to sponsor. I did want to highlight, sorry, I forgot to mention in regards to the fees, we kind of put a bit of a pricing to entice people to also sponsor at both arenas. So we do get quite a few sponsorships already in Exeter. We don't see as many in Stephen Arena. So the pricing is kind of hopefully going to entice people to do both arenas too. So.
thank you. Do we have any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thanks for the information. It's to me, it looks like it's very well done, and it's a start, and maybe down the road we can see what happens or how our advertising goes, but looks good. We have a mover and seconder.
Yep.
All in favor? That's carried.
The South Huron Council received staff report CL 13/2026, request for major drain repair and improvements, Falder, Muller, and Nago Municipal Drains 2026. And the South Huron Council hereby appoints William J. Dietrich, P.N. from Dietrich Engineering Limited as the municipal drainage engineer to prepare a report for the repair and improvement of the Falder, Muller, Nago Municipal Drains under Section 78 of the Drainage Act.
Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Dietrich, seconded by Councillor Neeb. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any notice of motions?
There are none.
Delegations from the previous meeting, any discussions? Seeing none. Any new business?
This item 12.1 was a request from Lambton Shores for the Canada Ontario Development Charges Reduction Program, letter of support for their application. It's also a bit of a review from a staff level of that we did not find an applicable program internally that worked for South Huron.
Okay.
Okay. That South Huron Council received CAO memo 03/2026 Development Charge Reduction Program, Lambton Shores request for letter of support, and the that council provide the municipality of Lambton Shores a letter of support for their application to the Development Charges Reduction Program, DCRP, for the Grand Bend Force Main Twinning Project.
Mover, please. Moved by Wendy McLeod Haggett, seconded by Marissa Vaughn. Counselor, any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy. Yes, just wondering with this project that's going forward with the twinning, what kind of financial implications it might have for our joint sewage treatment facility board? Are we going to be seeing more numbers coming our way?
Through the mayor or through the chair, I will start, but I know that Don will have the balance of the information. Now, this is just for the application only, and just so council is aware that if they are successful, and this is a grant that's going across Canada, so if they are successful, then the South Huron Council will need to get more information and sign. This doesn't necessarily mean that council approves signing for the actual program. It's just an approval, a letter of support for the application itself.
Oh.
So more information would be coming, but Don can maybe provide more information on the dollars.
Go ahead, sir.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Dietrich. That has a good ring to it, actually. So we're at the very early stages with this. So it is recognized by staff that this is a joint asset, the force main from PS2 to the sewage plant. It is covered by the existing agreement that we have with Lambton Shores for the Grand Bend sewage treatment facility. And the Lambton Shores are the administrating municipality, so they do have the authority to make an application like this. But all the details of who's paying for what, and if there is a cost implication for South Huron, or who gets a share of the additional capacity, that's all subject to an agreement to be negotiated. So this normally would go to the board, would be the normal protocol, but the timeframes are so tight that the province they just announced the program a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and the deadline is Friday to apply. So they're fast tracking, and our role in this is to assist our partner municipality in their application, but all the details are subject to an agreement later.
Thank you for that. Go ahead.
Yes, if I can just make a comment. I have no problem with supporting this application. But I just also would like to make a comment that since there is a board and there will be future potential financial implications, that I'm assuming, and I would like to see that come to the board because it won't be the same kind of priority as opposed to be negotiating as a first part amongst the staff. I think the board needs to be aware of what exactly this kind of means. So that's my 2 cents worth as a board member.
Through the chair, I will let the staff admin know so they can maybe bring the board up to date on this application. Okay.
We have a mover and a seconder. Any further comments? If none, all in favor? That's carried. Mayor and councilors' comments or announcements. Anyone have any? Wow, I like this. Counselor Neeb, I'm sorry.
Just because you said I like this, put my hand up. Last Monday, we held a Barn Heritage event and Century Farms event at the Barn Golf Course. And Hugh Fraser came from Niagara region, but he travels all around the province and helps catalog and record different barns from basically everywhere. And he comes out and helps property owners do barn studies. And it was really worthwhile event. We had around 20 people attend the event. And the one big takeaway from the event was there's multiple ways of preserving barns and preserving properties, not just physically preserving them, but digitally preserving them. And the Ontario Barn Preservation Society, they actually help property owners do that. And one big takeaway too was just knowing the story of your property and say like agricultural buildings, because it helps recognize like rural heritage, and that's something vitally important to record now. It's that these barns are starting to disappear across the landscape, and a lot of people don't know what is in a barn or what barns these old barns are. So anyways, it was a great event. We're looking at maybe bringing Hugh back and exploring the Century Farm project a little bit further. We had the junior farmers also speak about how to get signage that recognizes 100-year, 125-year, 150, etc. So yeah, good event.
Thank you for that. Anything further? I attended the OPP conference. I just want to keep Wendy up to speed. It was a great conference. This is the first one I've been to where the OPP and the municipal were separated in the rooms so that you didn't get, because they're not the same. They're way far apart. So I just found it very, very interesting that way. We got more out of it than normal. But yeah, so thank you. Councilor Vaughn.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, as you all know, I just recently came back from Federation of Canadian Municipality Conference. It was a great conference in Edmonton. Edmonton was not at all what I expected it to be. Very, very favorable impression on Edmonton. I don't have a report that I'm going to give you tonight about the things that I learned, but I did learn some very good things from Edmonton. First of all, they're very proud of their city. And I did have the opportunity to go on a number of walking tours this time around, which I found actually more beneficial than some of the in-class kind of tours. You actually got to see some results. And there's some very impressive work that I believe they've done on rental versus ownership in Edmonton, and they've been on a 10-year journey. They mentioned a lot of different approaches they've taken through their zoning bylaws and through design elements in taking older subdivisions and bringing them up to date with the housing crisis. So they gave a lot of references on these walking tours, and I did not have a notepad with me. So I've put out some queries, as we were encouraged to do, to the councillors that attended along these walking tours. And I'd like to bring back some pictures and some facts at our next council meeting. I just simply didn't have time to put together a report like that within a week. Yeah, next to council.
Thank you. Anything else? We have communications if anyone wants something pulled.
14.1, 14.2, 14.3, 14.4,
Oh,
14.5, 14.6, 14.7, 14.8, 14.9, 1410, 1411, 1412, 1413, 14.14, 1415, 1416.
14.4.
Oh, okay, that would be me. Yes, so in reading this piece of correspondence, it obviously sounds like a safety concern. And I would agree that it's not conducive to a sidewalk, a pedestrian sidewalk, to have bicycles and scooters and motorized bicycles all trying to vie for the same sidewalk space. Because yes, people can be not necessarily great with balance on their feet, can veer into a lane that a biker might wish to take. So I'm wondering if it's possible for us to have a staff report in terms of what the guidelines actually are for some of these motorized vehicles. Should they be on the street? Are there age limitations? I know people are going to be concerned about young children, toddlers being on bicycles, and would they be on Highway 4 as opposed to on a sidewalk? I just think we should maybe have a discussion around the council table about what's appropriate for a walkability type of community with motorized and pedaled vehicles along with pedestrians.
Thank you for that. Do we need a motion or just?
Yes, we do. Yeah, let's get a motion if we
So
can.
you would move that? Bring
Would
back
like
the
to move
staff
that for a staff report, yes.
Seconder, second by Councillor Eve. Council,
Yeah, thank you. And just a question now that we have a mover and seconder. Do we have a bike bylaw or a sidewalk bylaw at all with on anything?
Through the chair, I will let the clerk speak to that.
So through the chair, no. So this correspondence came to be after we received a concern asking for something to be done. And we did advise that there's no municipal bylaw that speaks to that. So it's outside of municipal jurisdiction at this point as something that possibly the OPP could be involved with, but we do not currently have a bike bylaw.
okay, so we got a mover and a seconder to bring a report back. All in favor? That's carried. That South Huron Council received communication items not otherwise dealt with. I apologize. Motion, please. Oh, Councillor Need, Councillor Oak, seconds. All in favor? That's carried. I'm sorry. I got excited.
Let me do the next one.
Yeah, you do the next one.
The South Huron Council proceeds in closed session at 7:38 PM for the purpose of addressing the following in accordance with subsection 239(2)C of the Municipal Act, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and the CAO and clerk remain in attendance.
Need a mover, please. Moved by Ted Oak, seconded by Councillor Eve. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, we'll take a little break.
Council met in closed session to consider matters it is permitted to do so under the Municipal Act and as listed on today's council agenda. The following items were considered during the closed session: a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. As a result of our closed session today, the closed meeting minutes of May 4th, 2026 were approved, and the following resolution will be considered by council in open session. That staff proceed with option 1 as discussed in closed session.
Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Counselor Neat, seconded by Counselor Wendy McLeod Haggett. All in favor? That's
That South Huron Council gives first, second, third, and final reading to bylaw 38, 2026, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a memorandum of understanding with the Perth Huron United Way for the purpose of formalizing a working relationship with the municipality of South Huron to assist in their goals and objectives to ensure vulnerable individuals living within the municipality of South Huron get the help they need in the place they call home.
sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, I only have one comment, and that is, I'm thinking about the monies that have gone to the United Way in the past have managed to find their way to our connection center. And I know we don't really have any detail in here to say that for the next 5 years, that's going to continue to occur. And I'm just wondering, is that possible to be in there, or how does this differ from our last agreement with the United Way?
Now, this agreement is very similar to the last agreement that we have. There was a few minor updated changes on the draft. And at their last meeting, the United Way did provide kind of an outlined correspondence attached to the report that showed that not all of the funds go to the connection center. Much of it does, but there are other, for Turning Point, towards the tax, income tax. There's a few different programs that are done within South Huron, but all the monies stay within South Huron.
Follow up?
Well, so I'm just, yes, that's fine that that's in the letter, but I'm just thinking in terms of guiding spirit. There's no real guiding spirit here. They could change their minds completely from this MOU and divert it to housing project.
Through the mayor, through the chair, sorry. What we could do is read it through as a friendly amendment as amended and attach the letter that was provided as part of my report as a schedule to this MOU. That would itemize whatever they listed in that that attachment would be attached to this bylaw. Is that
that would, to me, at least give intent of this is the way we're planning on spending the money broadly, as opposed to the way this is worded without that is they could change it completely.
Okay, so would Councillor Neeb and Councillor McLeod Haggett be amenable to a friendly amendment that this bylaw would be as amended?
Yes.
Yes.
Do I have to read it again?
No. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried.
That South Huron Council gives first, second, third, and final reading to bylaw 39, 2026, being a bylaw to confirm matters addressed at the June 15th, 2026 public meeting and regular council meeting.
Mover, please. Counselor Neeb. Counselor Vaughn. All in favor? That's carried. Smart part, but I can't do it tonight. Go ahead.
The South Huron Council hereby adjourn at 7:56 PM to meet again on July 13th, 2026 at 6 PM or at the call of the chair.
Counselor Wendy McLeod Hagan. Seconder, Counselor Neeb. All in favor? Carried.